Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Appreciate you taking the time. So today we are going to be discussing how homebuyer education and advising can help shape the buying experience for consumers and how DPA providers can help to make this happen earlier in the process and some of those benefits. So, excuse me, I'm going to kick us off today, and then we are going to have a few guests talk a little bit about their experience as homebuyer educators and advisors. So it won't just be me talking today to the group. So we're going to cover the benefits of education and advising. I'm going to talk a little bit about our statewide network that the center oversees. And then again, I'll turn it over to Maikita and Meredith, and Jill is also going to be presenting today to talk a little bit about their roles as educators and advisors. And then we'll just have a short discussion at the end as time permits about kind of what your thoughts are and the idea of requiring education early in the process, which is a best practice of down payment. So briefly, I always just like to ground us in why are we here. So the best practices for down payment assistance have been around for a couple of years. And really, this is an effort to help standardize and promote transparency. As we know, down payment assistance is often confusing for consumers and industry professionals. We are trying to limit barriers that prevent consumers from being able to access down payment assistance. We also want to increase funding to support the need and the demand out there with the growing cost of homeownership, the stagnant wages, and the high interest rates. And then also be really strategic in our approach with increasing funding to ensure that we are reaching the communities that have been left out of homeownership. And last but not least, begin to build coalition amongst the industry and particularly down payment assistance providers to better deploy down payment assistance and work together more collaboratively. So just briefly, some of the benefits of education and advising. So it's well known and documented that buyers who participate in homebuyer education and or individual advising tend to have better outcomes. And the earlier they participate in that, in the process of making the decision to buy a home, the better that is for them. So those who complete education or advising early in the process are more likely to shop for a mortgage and not stop at their local bank or the one referral they received from their friend, and understand that there's a variety of mortgages out there for them, and some are in their best interest and some are not. So they tend to shop for a mortgage and save on costs. They tend to lower their housing costs because they have a better concept of what they can afford versus what they may qualify for. And they're less likely to make a risky purchase or purchase more house than they can afford. They tend to improve and maintain their credit score. So, education spends a lot of time talking about the importance of credit, not just to become a homeowner, but also the cost of credit once you are in home ownership and the benefit to you of maintaining and improving your credit as a lifelong goal. They tend to have more savings and have more residual income for expenses, and overall have lower delinquency, default, and foreclosure rates, whether that's because there's more financial stability or because also if there is a crisis that comes up that's unexpected, they have established relationships with professionals and they know to reach out and seek help before they get too far down that road. So here in Minnesota, we have the wonderful benefit of having a network of organizations that offer homebuyer education and individual advising across the state. So the center works with about 30 nonprofit organizations statewide. We're very unique in this way. There is homebuyer education and advising available in other states, but it's very often not statewide and is usually regionally based. And the organizations often are not working in the same collaborative way that we are at the center in terms of the standards and the standard approach and curriculum that we use. So the advisors, they have to do a lot to do this work that they do. They're very committed to this work. They have to complete certification training with the center. for each individual service. So if they do homebuyer education, they have to complete a certification course. If they do advising, they have to complete a certification course. And if they do foreclosure prevention, which we're not going to spend time on today, they also have to complete a certification course. Advisors also have requirements for completing continuing education and having a certain number of hours of continuing education. And the majority of the advisors that work in our network are also certified housing counselors, which also requires a full exam. I will say that not every, while the majority of our organizations are HUD approved, not every organization does meet this standard. But even if they're not HUD approved, they are still required to meet the center's standards, which exceed really national standards in many ways. So this kind of can come up sometimes as DPA providers. When you're making the choice of requiring education with a HUD approved counseling organization. What I will just say, and I won't go down this tangent too long, is that I would encourage you to have your guidelines to say a home stretch provider or a HUD approved counseling organization, because often what happens if they attend education with an organization that is not yet HUD approved, they end up having to retake the course, the exact same course with another organization in the network. And what I will say is getting HUD approval is a big lift, and it can take 1 to 2 years. And often our smaller organizations that are focused on smaller communities or new immigrants or BIPOC communities often are not HUD approved right away when they join the network and may take some time to get there. So all that to just say, the network of advisors, whether they're a HUD approved counseling org or not, are held to a very high standard, training and certification requirements, and your buyers that are using your DPA are going to get high quality services. So just a little bit about homebuyer education in the context of the network. So the Homestretch curriculum has been around for over 30 years and has had 3 major iterations. So when it first launched, it was kind of a collective of information put together by a group of organizations that had great information, but had a little room for improvement. So in 2008, the curriculum went through a major transformation, really focused on making it consumer friendly and streamlining it and having some standardization. And then with the advent of technology and the pushing of technology based on COVID, we saw an opportunity to refresh the curriculum again. We got some feedback that it was time to do that. So in 2023, we took that on. It was about a year-long process that involved a lot of input from the advisors and consumers. And so we now have a digital manual, which has been a great tool for consumers. It's easy for them to access. They can access it on their phones, they can access it on computers, and it allows us as a network to provide for timely updates and ensure that that curriculum is reflective of what's happening in our market. So Homestretch is the primary curriculum that is used statewide. We have nearly 300 homebuyer education workshops offered each year. There is an abundance of opportunity for buyers to participate in education. Those workshops are offered both in person and virtually, and all of them are instructor-led. So our virtual classes are still instructor-led, and a great opportunity for people who need that flexibility. Just a few stats. 90% of the buyers that do attend Homestretch are attending prior to having a purchase agreement, which is the goal that we strive for. Because again, kind of back to the benefits in the beginning, we know that earlier in the process, the more benefit the buyer has from education. And 96% report an increased confidence after completing homebuyer education. So I'm going to invite Maikita to come on and come off mute. And Maikita is going to talk a little bit about homebuyer education for us. Welcome, Maikita.
Hi, everybody. Um, Like she said, my name is Maikita. I'm a homeownership advisor here at Three Rivers. I've been in this role for about a year, and I am the homebuyer educator here. And so I'm just gonna cover some topics about home buying education and just why it's important. And so we teach our home stretch classes here. We do them twice a month, and we're doing them online. And so we do get quite a few people to join our classes. And so I enjoy doing them for the most part. And so, yeah, let's just get into some topics covered in home buyer education. And so, um, in our home stretch, we have experts do the chapters. So we've had people from the banking industry talk about credit in those beginning chapters, and and then we have a real estate agent talk about making an offer and looking for a home, and then we usually have a lender talking about the process of applying for the mortgage loan and the closing part. And I think that the role that the volunteers play is really important. Um, and just making sure that we're vetting great volunteers that are not there to like drive business and like steer you in one direction or another, but just truly committed to helping our buyers understand the process. And I think uh, one of the things is just providing that firsthand knowledge and expertise. They're able to give real life examples. So the slides give all the information, but when you have somebody that's in the industry, in the field, that knows exactly what they're speaking and talking about and live it provides the person who's taking the class more security that like, okay, this is like real. It also kind of gives them access to a professional without feeling like they're signing up for something or having to like go with that real estate agent or that lender. They can just ask all the questions that they want in class to the professional and not feeling like they're pressured to um, sign with them or, and things like that. And so I think just them being able to give those real life examples and able to just kind of be that bouncing board full of for questions is just like so important. And it just provides that extra layer. Like the slides give the information, but having that professional speak from a firsthand knowledge base is always going to be way more effective than just like reading the slides, just me reading the slides. So I try for every class, if I can't find someone in the banking industry, I find at least at the bare minimum a realtor and a lender, so that's the most important people in that process for them. And so I feel like having those people on and speaking is, if I don't get someone to talk about credit, that's okay. I know about it. It's, we all have our own credit knowledge to some degree. And so it's okay if we're not having somebody speak about that versus someone that just me trying to explain like the lending portion of it. And so topics that usually interest buyers is number one, down payment assistance. Most of them are probably in class to access the down payment assistance, but I think even when we cover that in the chapters, it always comes back up in a different chapter or in a different way. So it's always um, interesting to hear about, uh, interesting to hear in different classrooms what's important to that classroom setting. So some people may be way interested. I think overall they're all interested in down payment assistance, but then some people may you may have a class where they're interested in like, how do I make an offer? What Oh, a purchase agreement is a contract. That's actually me making an offer. And so I think the most important thing that they're really interested in is always the down payment assistance and kind of what goes on after they put that purchase agreement in, or uh, what happens around that time when purchase agreements are, being made and such. And so some of the things that we hear from buyers early in the process. So I usually receive feedback about how informative the class is, how much they actually learn, and how like people think that the home buying process is this in their head. Like everyone has this thing in their head about what the home buying process is. And then after they take the class, they're like, oh, I get it. And I think like they're just happy they took the class before getting into the process because it's just so many aha moments, especially when we talk about that mortgage approval, talking about how a car payment can actually hold you back from owning a home. And I think those aha moments are so important to people before they make the decision to go out and like purchase a car. Like, do you really want to own a home? Well, you might want to wait on the car. And people don't actually know that. They don't get debt to income ratio. They don't know what it is. And so when they take our class, I feel like they're so like, wow, I'm so happy I took this class. It's just so informative. And they have like lots of aha moments of like, okay, now I know what to do. And so um, and then the so buyers, those that's for buyers that are kind of early in the process, but some of the buyers that are like nearing closing and they have a closing schedule. So often I have buyers who are in this situation. They're closing. I've had people close tomorrow, like the next day in class. Um, and so this is happening a lot more. We're seeing, but it's just a lot of appreciation, I think, for them because they're happy to finally complete that last step before closing. You know, some people are there to unfortunately just check a box and maybe not, you know, absorb the information because they're already closing. They've already done the purchase of agreement and everything. But I think also I have buyers on the other hand who they're not really informed. They're not an informed buyer. So the knowledge that they know or they've gained it from the professional along the way. And along the way, the professional probably did not explain every single thing. And so when they take the class and they're near closing, they're like, oh, that's why you have to do that. And I think it can go either way. Like people realize that, oh, maybe I should have taken this class before, or um, just getting that reinforcement of knowledge again, um, if they're a well-educated buyer. And so yeah, I can. So I'll share a story. How is okay? So I have like two stories because um home buyer education I feel is like it's so important, but it's when it's I have two different scenarios because we often have three different types of participants in class. We have a participant that's there to check a box and is closing soon. We have some participants that are there to start the process and learn how the process goes so they can make that informed decision if they're ready for home ownership or not. And then we have the buyer that's going to take the class to learn and later realize I need more support. I'm not ready for this. This is just not um, what I expected it to be. So I feel like we always have like a set of those types of buyers that are in or buyers that are in class. And so um, one of the stories that I have, so I have when people access our down payment assistance, sometimes their DTI is just way high, and that requires them to come in for advising. And so I was doing advising. I know I'm talking about education, but I promise I have a point. I was doing advising with this client who was coming from a $900 rent payment and going into a $3,000 mortgage, who was already working a lot. And I just didn't see how like it was going to work for her. Well, she didn't take home buyer education. She took home stretch because she's learning the information from the professional she's working with. The lender said, do this. The lender is saying, do this. But then when you get to the down payment assistance team and we're worried, how are you going to make this happen? Then that's when you have to come see me and we go through the budget and I show you like probably going to be house poor. And so this was a buyer that was not educated. They didn't realize that I'm making a huge difference. Paying $900 a month. I mean, I don't even know many people that pay $900 a month for rent or mortgage these days. And then you're going all the way and you're tripling what you're paying out right now. And I felt like if she had taken our class firsthand, she would have had the knowledge and like the confidence to say I cannot afford this, because what you can afford on paper is different than what you really can afford, you know. And so I felt like, oh, this person should have seen me first, you know, like instead of like seeing me when you're closing in a couple of days, and you know you need to do this so that you can understand what you're getting into. And then I have another person who literally, we met them, we did counseling, and I signed them up for class. And from class, they were just in class, so attentive, like just soaking in all the information, asking questions. And because of the class, they were able to make informed decisions. They were able to obtain that pre approval, get a monthly mortgage payment that they can afford. That's not too different than what they're paying right now. And I feel like he really took the information from class, because he would come back to me and say, well, you said this in class. And so I'm just making sure that I'm doing the right things. And I'm like, yes, you are. You know, yes, I did say that in class. And I feel like if you don't take home stretch and you take framework and you that's a self-guided thing. You're gonna do that just to get it done, because you know you're nobody's watching, nobody's facilitating for you. You're just getting it done, and you're not really probably soaking in all the information. Versus if you take our class, you're hearing from experts, you're hearing from an agent, you're hearing from a lender, you're hearing from people who are in the industry, and they're giving you so much information that you don't know, and you're like, okay, I can make better decisions. And so I feel like it's so important to take home buyer education, because you just never you don't know what you don't know, and home buying is such a complicated process, and it's such a long process. And if you have someone that's like kind of like, you know, when you're in my classroom, I kind of have a culture in my classroom where it's like we're all learning here. I'm still learning, I'm still going through these things, I'm still working on things, I'm still trying to accomplish this. And so I feel like when you're in that space with other people, it kind of helps you feel like, okay, I'm not in this alone, versus like, you know, going with the lender and doing everything the lender says. And then you get to the finish line and you're like, yeah, you're right. How am I going to afford $3,000 and I'm already working overtime? So I just feel like I can't stress how much it's important to really just take the class. Not only, yeah, you will get some benefits out of it. You may qualify for down payment assistance. You may, you know, but the education and everything else that comes along with it is just so valuable. And just having that given for 399 is like this an extra added bonus. So yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Maikita. I really appreciate your sharing and giving your perspective and what you see with buyers. Now I am going to turn it over to Meredith and Jill, who are going to talk about advising.
Thank you. My name is Meredith. I am a homeownership specialist with Dakota County CDA. I've been an advisor for a little over 2 years. I teach homebuyer education as well. I do pre-purchase counseling and advising as well as foreclosure. And we do refinance as well here at the CDA. Um, Education too, just to go off what she was saying, it's so powerful to be educated home buyers. We want all of our attendees at Homestretch and the clients that we meet with one-on-one, not only to get into that future home, but we want them to be successful homeowners, which is really the goal of why we're all here. When we get that initial call from people, they say, I want to buy a home. What are the steps? What do you recommend? We just get all types of calls like that. Do I qualify for these services, these down payment assistance programs? We always just kind of, in our best practices here at the CDA, we try and get people to take home buyer education first and foremost. That's where you're going to go over all of that information of just the overwhelming process that is going from everywhere from budgeting all the way to you're a homeowner. Now, what are the things I need to know as a homeowner? There's a lot of different steps to that. So once they go through that, then we suggest you meet with us one-on-one. When you meet with us one-on-one, it really gets to that next step into these are the specifics of this household, this is our income, things like that. So we really get into the nitty-gritty. When people go to homebuyer education, they hear about some down payment assistance programs. Now you're meeting with us. Do I qualify for these? Who are some people that I can connect you with to see if you're a good fit? And then, so we go to the initial appointment. This is kind of a little agenda that we go through with at the CDA that we created. The first thing we want to know when we sit down with all of our clients is what kind of questions do you have for me? We want to make sure we answer all of those questions throughout that meeting. Most people come to us, I will say, with homebuyer education background. Not everyone does. So sometimes we have to take a couple extra steps for them to get a little bit caught up. So those meetings are typically a little bit longer. Another important thing about our services that we really want people to know is our services are free. Not a lot of people know that when they initially come to us, how much does it cost, things like that, but we are a free service. So that's really important. You can utilize us. Not only Dakota County residents, we are out of Dakota County, but we do work with others as well. So it's just something to keep in mind. Um, but we always want to know, what questions do you have for us? The next thing that we go through are some things that we did cover in homebuyer education, whether or not they took homebuyer education. We just want to kind of refresh those home buying steps. What step are you currently on? You're getting educated, and then where do we go from here? We review credit, just an overall, what is credit, just different things that make it up, types of mortgages. We go into typically the four big types of mortgages, which is the traditional conventional loans, FHAs, VAs, rural developments. We go through that type of things. Um, handouts would be additional information, especially for people who didn't take homebuyer education. There's a lot of things that they do need to know in order to protect themselves, such as fair housing laws, the importance of a home inspection, just things like that, that we like to review and make sure that they have all of that information. Then we review their credit. This part is optional. We do here a soft pull, a tri-merge soft pull. So we get all three scores for our clients if they decide to elect to do so. Then we review the specifics on their credit report. A lot of the credit reports that we see for people do have errors on it. So it's really important to get to know and understand what's on your credit report, making sure that information is accurate and correct. If they're buying or purchasing a home with another borrower, just knowing what their score is as well, because the lenders will use the lower of the two. Um, just kind of getting a good review at that, seeing where they are financially. Are there things we need to improve? Are there disputes we need to do? So we do a good overview of what their credit is looking like. Um, the next thing that we do, which honestly I think is one of the most important, probably the most important, we look over their budget. We have every client come to us and they have to first and foremost fill out a household budget, a monthly household budget. So having listed all of those expenses out, we just kind of review what they're spending their money on. Um, Once we do that, see what their budget's like as a renter, we go and we do what is a qualifying ratio. And I think Jill might talk a little bit more about what's affordable versus what you may qualify for as far as the lending industry. Us as housing counselors, we go for a little bit more of a conservative approach, usually 30 to 35% of net income, as to where lenders look at your gross income. So we go over that qualifying ratio of how much of a house would you qualify for based on these payments. And then we go back to the budget. So then we go back to what would your budget look like as a homeowner? And we go over different things to build in. Jill might talk about this as well, but things like home maintenance expenses, just having an additional funding for things like homeowners associations, maybe assessments, things break in your house. It's obviously your responsibility to fix them. And then we do also talk about other additional resources where we kind of get to the action plan or the next steps. We have to write out an action plan for our clients of things that we're going to guide them along the way and things we recommend as housing counselors for them to do, as well as things that we'll help them do on our part. If you go to the next slide. Um, and then once we send that action plan, the rest is we do check in with all of our clients. That frequency depends on the individual buyer. Some buyers, they're ready to start meeting with lenders tomorrow. Some already have a lender. Some are like, well, maybe I need to work on my credit a little bit, or I need to get that next job promotion and figure out my budget, review my bank statements. So it's all just dependent on where they're kind of at. We just give them little suggestions and things that they can do going forward because we all want homeownership as the end goal. And again, for them to be successful. Um, we do provide referrals as needed. The rule of three, we give three resources, or I should say references, if they ask for lenders, um, home inspectors, any type of specialty programs. So for down payment assistance, we there's a lot of things going on with the state right now. Our county doesn't specifically have a down payment assistance program, but the state has great resources, um, such as the Minnesota Housing Startup Step Up. They have to work with a lender who's affiliated with that, so we give just those types of referrals. Like I said, we always give at least three people for them to choose from, so they're not just led in one specific way. We use people that we have relationships with as far as maybe they present with us for homebuyer education. We tell them, ask family, ask friends, who have they used? Do they trust that person? We want to make sure that they're asking their lender, their realtor, questions. Do you work with first-time home buyers? What types of programs or down payment assistance do you think that I may qualify for? There's a lot of different things like that that we give as far as different referrals. Maybe they need even take a step back, more work on their finances. We do have financial programs here in Dakota County that are free that could help people as far as like debt management, just managing their finances, things like that. But yeah, a lot of them come to us too. I didn't even know that like there was a first generation home buying program. Can you give me more information? We review, the specifics of what that means. Does that apply to them? There's other things such as we have clients come to us who need non-interest bearing loans, so we give them resources for that. And yeah, I'm gonna go to Jill now.
Good afternoon. I'm Jill Bjorklund, and I am also a homeownership specialist, and I've been in the industry for 3 years. I do spend probably, definitely a majority, more like 80% or more, actually advising foreclosure clients. And sometimes I tell people there's a reason that there's 80% with foreclosure and 20% with home buyers, is because too many people got into a situation that they shouldn't be in. So I'm a little bit biased. So we, as Meredith said, we really try to help people prevent themselves from getting into situations where they're set up for failure. Many of our foreclosure clients have been purchased in the last 4 years and probably have been struggling since they started. So we really try to be in the ahead of all of that. And that's why advising and home buyer education is so important in our eyes. What we see as far as impact is that both other presenters have mentioned people walk away with much more confidence in their knowledge and in their understanding of how things are going to work and what their role is and how they can actually self-advocate for themselves, because we really emphasize that you need to know how much you want your house payment to be. Don't let somebody else tell you what your house payment to be. You need to know what fits into your budget with your lifestyle. So they have a much better understanding of their expenses. Let's face it, Americans are not good at managing monies. Most of us don't save enough. Most of us overspend. We have too high of credit. So we try to help people see where they're at. We have a sheet that we hand out in our class that's called red flags. And, you know, we see a lot of people in our foreclosure where they have their accounts, they have several different bank accounts, and they have finances going, you know, funds going from one to the other, one to the other. You can't even make sense out of it. So if you're borrowing from the left to give to the right and vice versa, it's not a good thing. If you're using a lot of buy now, pay later types of programs. So we have discussions about all those. And again, as Makita pointed out, if your monthly payment right now for rent is $1,000 and you're looking at a house payment that's going to be $2,000, how's that going to feel? Do you have a lot of comfort zone right now, or don't you have comfort zone? So they really walk away with a better understanding about what it means as far as here's what the lending industry might qualify you for, but what can I really afford? And not to let somebody just tell you what you can afford. I recently had clients that came in and they didn't do, they had done home buying education. I can't remember which type, but they hadn't done any advising, and they had gotten to the point where they were about ready to, you know, purchase a house. And the price of the house, you know, their monthly payment just kind of kept going up. Their costs kept getting added on. And finally, they were brave enough to walk away and just said, no, we cannot afford that payment. So they came back to us and said, okay, we went this route and we didn't do advising. Help us figure out what's the right way and what can we afford and where do our finances stand. So it just can make a big difference to people. Seeing some of the expenses, they didn't realize, you know, mortgage insurance, homeowners association dues. And then as Meredith pointed out, we build right into their budget when we're reviewing and advising with them. Here's how much is a recommended amount that you should be saving monthly for home maintenance. And hopefully you don't need that for a year or two because of course, home maintenance is usually very expensive when you do need it. But we tell them you need to build that right into your budget. I think another big advantage and an impact is that people will call me or email me later and they'll say, you know, I think I need new homeowners insurance. And what do you know about that? Or, you know, how come my property taxes are so high? Or they call us back because they know, they trust us and they know that we're a good resource. I had a woman call me a year or two after even a foreclosure. She's like, I really think I need to do this now, but I really don't know who to go to figure out how to do. I think she needed a home equity loan or something. So people find us as a really reliable resource, and they're getting good information and good referrals through us. On the slide here next to, over to the right side is a quote. These were from actually home buyers that, in my mind, were very educated people to begin with. But they came back and they said, is there a way, how can we show how wonderful this program is? Because we felt it was really helpful to us to have people actually sit down and show us where we are, where we stand, what we need to do next, what are the steps, and to make sure that we don't get in over our head. And it was really nice to see that they wanted to know how they could help promote our program. And that's all I have.
Great. Thank you, Jill. All right. Thank you, Makita, Jill, Meredith. This is super helpful, and I appreciate you guys talking a little bit about what you do and what your role is. So I know we've got a handful of DPA administrators on the call. And I know that just looking at the names, all of you require education. So I think we all know that you value it and you see the value in it. And I think what we're really trying to impress upon people and share by kind of giving you a little bit of a deeper dive and some insight into what happens with education and advising and the experience of the consumer is to really encourage this best practice for down payment assistance, which is that homebuyer education has to be required and completed completed before signing a purchase agreement. I think that in order for people to really have the benefit, they do need to really get engaged early in the process. And I think, some programs do require advising, and I think, there is some consideration about the benefit. Obviously, Meredith and Jill just talked a lot about how people value that and what they get out of it. It's been my experience, though, and I think probably others can attest to this, that if you're doing education early in the process and you feel like there's some missing information or some things that you need to understand, you're going to opt into advising as a resource because you're going to learn about the availability of that in education. So I would just say that, kind of the standard practice has been homebuyer education is required before closing, and we really want to promote the value of making that change to those guidelines and having education be required prior to purchase agreement. So I would love to just open it up to the group if there's comments, thoughts, questions, clarifications about anything that was presented today. We've got about 10 minutes left, and I'm happy to open it up to the group. Is there anyone on the group that'd be willing to talk about maybe making the change or why they're not currently requiring it prior to purchase agreement and at closing? Prior to closing, excuse me.
Hi, this is Casey with NeighborWorks Home Partners. I would say I think making the change is like very important. I think getting that education up front before they enter into a purchase agreement is like the best thing that we can do for our buyers, because it's not all about just being able to get down payment assistance or get you into a home, but we want to make sure that you're staying in your home as well. So I think we're working with some of the cities and other funders that we work with, they just looking to deploy their money. And I will say in the past, in working with some funders, because of the deadline of spending, there has been a slowdown of spending of funds when there has been a need for a I'm sorry, my phone again, when there is a need for the homebuyer education to be completed prior to purchase agreement, to signing a purchase agreement. We have found in some of our down payment assistance loans that we have administered that it has slowed down the spending. And so when the funders are on a strict spending deadline, then they may waive that and say, hey, we just need it prior to close. Or we have had some funders that say 30 days prior to close. So yeah, but I think changing that, if that could be changed, that would be very important.
Thanks, Casey. That's a good perspective, is there's kind of multiple competing factors sometimes. And I think from this side of the things, if that was just a standard for all DPA, then the industry would get on board, right? So there may be a time where there would be a learning curve that could slow down the spending of money. But if industry understands universally that all down payment requires that, whoever they contact first is going to encourage them to go straight to education. Thanks for that perspective, Casey. Is there any others who would like to share what their experience has been or what their thoughts are around this or questions? So I'm just going to take that as a solid nod that everybody is going to start promoting this and making these changes. So I would just like to once again thank our guests, Jill, Meredith, and Maikita, for talking about the work that they do. And you can hear it in the passion that all of you bring to the topic of, I think you guys know, and Jill, just your perspective on the people that you're seeing in foreclosure who, have been in their home for less than 4 years. I know that COVID has been a factor, but I think we're seeing a lot of non-COVID related foreclosures that are going back to just that affordability factor and rising costs just in general. So I appreciate that perspective and you guys sharing today. And the hope is that we can really start to push this idea, a very small change to a practice that could be very impactful for the buyer's experience, and have the benefits vastly outweigh some of the delays in spending of funds, and other factors that come into play. So we are going to convene again in February. So in a few months, we will convene. I'll share that topic in the new year. We're likely to focus on some of our learnings from the First Gen Community Fund and some other pilots that we've been working on, and how some of those best practices are impacting that work. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I will share the recording, so if you have colleagues or peers that you would like to see this presentation, be sure to forward that along and invite them to future meetings. Thank you, everyone.